From the makers of Spiders Will Eat Your Face comes The Animal Saga, 3 films including Spiders Will Eat Your Face, Hamsters, The History, and Goldfish Bowl, Death by Glass. All this pet history on Amazon and Big Weasel Lil Weasel.club.
Hey guys, you already know what it is. It's Joe, and I'm here to give you your minute's worth of weekly updates for How Many Fingers Am I Holding Up, the podcast. You down with J-O-E? Yeah, you know me! An OPP reference, making a cameo in this intro from the recesses of my mind. First up, How Many Fingers Am I Holding Up? The Facebook group has been poppin' this past week. If you have any thoughts on the next 3 movies that we're reviewing, Ready Player One, Isle of Dogs, or A Quiet Place, drop your thoughts on the Facebook forum because we're actively discussing them now. Mike and I want to start voicing more opinions on the podcast beyond our own or even our guest, and we'd love to quote some of the stuff from the group and discuss it. Guys, I think this is going to be the last week I remind you to watch The Handies. It's our very own Film Awards ceremony for all of the films of 2017 that's viewable only on our YouTube or our website, howmanyfingerspodcast.com. Check it out, or don't, and I'll never talk about it again. And again, if you guys want to support the podcast, we've got t-shirts for only $9.99. Get them while they're hot. Get them while they're hot. No, these t-shirts aren't even hot anymore. We're not going to print these same t-shirts again. We're probably going to go with another design or color once we run out of these t-shirts, so get yourself an OG HMF t-shirt while you can. That's at howmanyfingerspodcast.bigcartel.com. We've also got some stickers and we've got some koozies there too. We're talking A Wrinkle in Time this week, so let's get right into the review!
Hi, I'm Mike.
And I'm Joe.
And you're listening to How Many Fingers Am I Holding Up, the podcast. And this week, we're reviewing A Wrinkle in Time.
What if I were to tell you all of the concepts in this movie are true? That we could fold space and time to skip through all 109 awful minutes of this movie to get to the end, just like that.
Welcome to How Many Fingers Am I Holding Up? Featuring 2 guys getting fudged and reviewing movies in a weekly podcast form.
And that came to us from Facebook via Mr. Tony, Mr. Tony.
Mr. Tony, Mr. Tony, Tony Tromador. Thank you so much for that synonym suggestion. If you have any more further synonym suggestions, hit us up wherever you want to talk to us. We'll accept those synonyms wherever. But this week, we're drinking Murphy's oil soap.
Sounds about right.
Right? No.
Okay.
Ooh. Murphy's imported stout, draft style.
St. Patrick's Day.
I can hear it's got one of those like cream balls inside. Ooh.
Yeah, what exactly are those balls for?
It has something I don't fully know. I don't want to speak out of turn.
Same.
I think it has something to do with like beers that are like creamier.
Yeah,
stouts
like
and stuff like that. Like I feel like you do it when you want to do like a canned version of like what's sort of like a nitro almost like beer.
Okay, right.
But don't quote me on that.
No,
I'm just a guy who drinks beer every week for the podcast.
It's definitely been in Guinness. It's been in like a what is that? Huntington's or Boddington's?
Boddington's, yeah.
Boddington's beer that we've had. Yeah, this is Murphy's imported stout, drought style.
That's not bad.
Just because it actually is St. Patrick's Day.
When we're recording this, yeah.
And when we're recording this, and you're probably thinking, like, how fucking far in advance do they record these?
You fucking cheaters!
This is our last episode of the night.
The infamous 3rd episode. It's also a post-Chinese food dinner episode.
I feel
so if we fall asleep during this episode, the MSG is why.
I feel a lot better after the Chinese food, though.
Better, you got something solid in your stomach to soak up the alcohol.
Yeah, I really started, I don't know, losing it during game night. I was like, man, all I have is vodka and a bunch of different beers in my stomach. And
I feel like I just have like a hangover that's set in early where I just can't shake this pounding headache that I have right now.
yeah, that's why I took it easy on the vodka. I can't do hard alcohol.
So I tuned into Red Sparrow 2 weeks ago and last week's game night episode. But this week we're doing Disney Oprah's A Wrinkle in Time. Joe, if you want to give me that IMDb description, I'll get us on with some mic notes very shortly.
Yeah, sure. After the disappearance of her scientist father, three peculiar beings send Meg, her brother, and her friend to space in order to find him. What a goofy fucking description.
It's like, I don't know that it's grammatically incorrect, but it's grammatically poor.
Yeah.
Just in terms of like the organization of like, after the disappearance of her scientist father, three peculiar beings? Like, they should have organized it so that Meg is...
There's a lot of things going on in that description, yeah.
That's just my 2 cents, you know? I'm not one of the top IMDb description writers, like these people are. But Disney Oprah's A Wrinkle in Time was... I'm sorry, I'm cracking myself up with my own jokes here. Based on the 1962 novel of the same name by Madeline Lee Langle?
Sure.
I never read it. I know Joe read it. He can tell us about that later. And it was directed by Ava DuVernay, who has previously directed the documentary Compton in C Minor, the documentary This Is the Life, How the West Was Won, O-N-E, not W-O-N.
Very clever.
I Will Follow, Middle of Nowhere, Selma, and another documentary, 13th. The only ones of those I've seen are Selma and 13th, and Selma was pretty good. I remember coming out of the theater and my only real complaint was the fact that they like had like the Common song for that soundtrack. It like came in while the movie was still going. So it was like this period piece, and then it's just kind of like, oh, Common. Like,
did you see the most recent SNL with the...
I was dying.
You like a TED Talk set to music, aren't you?
It was great because they had those commercials with Common that have been airing recently playing on for my Hulu during that.
They're so bad. And like, yeah, I really like how they like rip into Common like 3 times. Just like, this is like what white people think is correct to kind of like put Common into like, it just, I don't know.
In the SNL one, he's like, you don't really rap, do you?
Yeah.
It was funny because there are like those Common commercials that were, I don't know what the company it's even for, but it's just like him doing like his quote unquote rapping spoken word essentially thing to a commercial. And like I was like saying that to like Rowan as we were watching. I was like, I really can't stand Common. He doesn't rap. He just talks. Yeah. And then they make that joke in the SNL episode.
Yeah.
Anyway, but Selma is a pretty good movie. I remember being very impressed with that, and then really, really enjoying 13th last year. It's a very eye-opening documentary about sort of looking at like the law and order and prison industrial complex, you know, as being sort of like a new form of slavery, maybe, and how there's all these other interests that are involved there, and it's not as simple as just, you know, bad people go to prison and whatnot. It has a lot to do with profit and racism and a whole bunch going on there. So definitely would recommend watching 13th. That's on Netflix still, I believe, right? That was an original Netflix documentary.
Netflix original, yeah.
Yeah, definitely check that out. And Selma was pretty good too, but I have no idea about the rest of those from Ava DuVernay. And then Disney Oprah's A Wrinkle in Time was written by Jennifer Lee, who has previously written Wreck-It Ralph, Frozen. She wrote the story for Zootopia and the upcoming Frozen 2. And then she's co-directed Frozen and the upcoming Frozen 2. So clearly someone with a background in animation of some sort from the writing side.
Yeah, definitely.
That's about all I have for this besides the cast really. Oprah Winfrey, Reese Witherspoon, Mindy Kaling, Gugu Mbatha-Raw, Michael Pena, Storm Reed, Zach Galifianakis, Chris Pine. I don't know. Storm Reed, I guess just because the people that are in this and because she's a newcomer, but she's always so low on all of these, even though she's the main character in this movie. I never really understand that. Like,
yeah,
it may be her first move, but like just bill her first. If she's the main character, if you believed in her enough to cast her in this, then...
Well, maybe she made the least amount of money, and that's usually how people are listed.
But it's just weird when someone's the main character and it's like,
Right.
but the top build is Oprah Winfrey. Mm-hmm. Oprah's not the main character in this.
Again, she probably made the most money to show
I'm sure,
up.
yeah.
Yeah.
But anyway, let's talk about Disney Oprah's A Wrinkle in Time.
This is a hard movie to talk about, again, because this is, like you said earlier, A Wrinkle in Time is one of my first encounters of sci-fi as a kid. And it's a really phenomenal book, written in the 50s, 60s.
1962.
I think it won whatever that prize is. It begins with an N. That's like, it's, I don't know. It's some sort of high novel award. But yeah, it's a novel that it's kind of a hard sci-fi for children, and the book still holds up. I've been rereading it this week. I did not get the chance to finish it as I planned before this review. But this is a book I've always kept with me that I've reread multiple times. I think I even brought this to... It was just with me when I was at college, just because it's... I don't know. It's just a great book. It's a really well done piece of literature. So this movie's a fucking nightmare, man. This is like, oh man, it's just there's. I don't know what happened when somebody tried to, like, it's so jumbled from, like, they kind of take people and places from this book and then kind of like jumble it into this screenplay. Doesn't have a lot of the same themes at all. This book is very much sort of like a C.S. Lewis kind of, like, there's some sort of like Christianity theme in here. I think like at the end when like the three witches are like giving them like the gifts or whatever, one of their gifts is literally them referencing like a Bible verse, like of kind of being like, I don't remember exactly what they say.
I wonder if it's the Mrs. Who's the Mindy Kaling character? Is that Miss Who?
Yeah.
I wonder if she's quoting a Bible verse.
Perhaps, yeah, they say something.
Because that would make sense, because in this movie, that's the one scene where she doesn't quote things, and it's very poorly, they try to explain that.
Yeah, let me start with that, too, just because I've been reading this book very recently, is, like, this is how terribly this was conveyed into a screenplay. In the book, again, they do explain this in the movie, but that character, who is it, Mrs. Who?
I think, yeah.
Is so far advanced beyond language that she can only really reference kind of, she can only like really reference quotes and kind of project those into what the context of the situation is. It's not my favorite part of the book, but it's interesting, and she'll often, almost all of them are in foreign languages. It's a very romantic character, where it's French and Spanish and so on and so forth. But then she'll say that, then she'll reference who said it, and then she'll translate it in, or no, she'll say that, and then maybe she'll say like maybe I don't know. This is all out of order. She'll say it in its native language, say what the native language was, credit who did that, and then translate it in English. And somehow that got lost in translation with this character, because Mindy Kaling's character will be like, damn, Chris Tucker, American. And was like, well, you're not translating. Like,
she doesn't even say the full name. She just says the Tucker.
Yeah. But she says she just skips
the fact that she's translating something.
Right, yeah. She skips the fact that she's translating something, which means...
And she's just saying a nationality.
It has nothing to do with a nationality. I feel like somebody who was writing this just thought that would be more inclusive. Like, oh, like people of all over the world. Like, that's not what that was meant to be. That was like just meant to be... It's a very romanticized kind of view of the world. And I don't know. It was just... It was so dumb. And her whole character was fucking stupid, and I just want to dismiss that character as a whole right now.
I don't know.
The book uses such important people and quotes and everything, and then this movie uses Shakespeare twice, Chris Tucker, Outcast, and Rumi. Like, it's just like it was all over the place in poor taste. I don't know. It was just weird.
It was a weird casting of Mindy Kaling for this. Like, not that comedic actors can't have serious or dramatic turns.
Right.
But I just don't know what really drew her to the role besides like it seeming like an important movie. And maybe there being money in it, and
well, it's more
Oprah
like
being involved, and
what drove people to cast her. I think because I think this
both
is a
sides
really
of that
great
coin. Because I mean, I love Mindy Kaling in The Office. I've seen clips of the Mindy Kaling show. And is that what it's called, Mindy Kaling show or Mindy Kaling Project?
Yeah.
And I do think she's great in that. I've especially like the more times that I repeat watch The Office, I come to appreciate the Kelly Kapoor character even more in that, and the fact that she was a writer on The Office. So I think she's fantastic, but in like a comedy sense. And like I don't think that, again, I don't know who would play a good version of this character. I guess I'm more just disappointed that someone that I respect like took this role that has like so little behind it. Like I think they even tried to like I'm glad that you explained that that's what was going on with that character, right, because they rushed through that explanation so much where it's just like, oh, that's my sort of next thing that I'll go on a tangent about is the Charles Wallace character. Can't stand him, but he just like runs into like an abandoned house, and she just happens to be there, and like in one really fast, poorly delivered line of dialogue, he tries to explain why she's speaking like that, and I completely missed it. And I was just like, oh, okay, I guess I just have to accept that this like all-knowing like deity that's among the three of them can't speak, even though the rest of them can. And that's a better explanation that you just gave, in the book of, her being so advanced and so smart that, she has gone beyond language itself.
Right, she transcends language. Yeah. This is such a gross interpretation of this fucking book. It's just like, again, it's in the book they live in kind of like this dilapidated house in the middle of the woods. They're not wealthy, and almost everybody is ugly, and that's fine, and that's okay, And then again, it's kind of Charles Wallace is this incredibly complex character that they don't capture at all in this movie. They even have so much genius like dialogue in the book that they just blatantly kind of like in the book they even go like there's kind of like, would you like some like he's so smart that he kind of predicts that she's going to come down from the attic or whatever, and they're in such a dilapidated house, and there's like a hurricane in the area that the kind of attic is like shaking, and they're just poor because the dad's not there, and and she comes down the stairs, and he kind of like a fucking Bond villain, like knows she's coming. And he's kind of like, I have milk on the stove for you. And she's like, okay. She's like, well, that's too much for one mug. And he's like, oh, that's fine. Mother will be here. And then like the mom like walks in. Like it's just like a very tight and just beat by beat. Like I don't know why like they go such like a roundabout way, even just in the dialogue and like changing that kind of thing.
Yeah, because in that scene in the movie, he's like, "Oh, well,
somebody
you never know who might show up." His fucking like smug, like
he's more like Manny
I understand that
in
like
Modern Family than he is
like a little man.
Right, he's supposed to be born. He's not supposed to be like this. Like, what if an adult was in a child's body? It was like, no. What if a child prodigy was born into? He's not supposed to have adult sensibilities. He's supposed to be intelligent. There's a.
Well, I think they were trying to get that across, but they didn't know how because this movie is so afraid to go into any actual specifics of science or anything like that.
Oh my god, yeah.
So like all we get is like dialogue of like, oh, he's a genius. He's so smart. He's a genius. There's that one awful scene where like he overhears the two teachers like talking, where it's just like so poorly delivered. It's so clearly like clunky exposition of like, well, yeah, the son is great, but the daughter is a mess ever since that father left, and I bet that it was him going away on an affair. Like it's just like, oh, let's just gossip about everything that the audience needs to know right now. Like I know you have to do that
exposition
sometimes,
gossip,
but they could deliver it a little bit better without it just being like, I'm going to speak very clearly so the audience knows exactly what's going on in the backstory of this movie. And then like when they're explaining like that this kid's a genius, he's just drawing in a notebook. And like, what is he really doing that's like, that makes him a genius besides like, he knows how to work a stove and cook and make milk.
Right, yeah.
He heats up milk for people who might be coming down.
Right.
And he draws in a notebook. So like, we don't really get any actual evidence of him being smart. And then how does him being smart have anything to do with the fact that he knows that these extraterrestrial beings are coming down? Like, has he built something that's going to communicate with these deities? Or like, what has he tapped into? Like, that's fine if it's just him tapping into something, but they don't go into that. They don't explain that at all. There's no explanation for, if he's smart, what does intelligence have to do with this precognition of, oh, these beings are going to come, or I've tapped into this other realm where I can speak with Mrs. Whatsit, and I have been arranging this whole like plan that we're going to go on with. And it's not only that, I hate in like movies or like fantasy especially, I think does it a lot, where rather than doing like the whole like fish out of water type thing, they do like sort of the inverse of that, where like Mrs. Whatsit comes here and she's kind of like, you know, she's in our world, but she's kind of like, oh, like you guys don't understand this, you guys don't have like this where you come from. And like I want to call him Manny because that's how the Charles Wallace character ends up doing that too, where like even though he's with like his own family who he grew up with, who like he knows what, if he's so smart, he knows like what they know and what they don't know, and what he's, you know, he knows what he's taught them already, has the same attitude with them of like speaking in these like cryptic phrases and just being like, oh, you'll understand soon. And like it's so smug and annoying to just me as the audience. I can't imagine how the actual characters feel like talking to their jackass little brother like that.
Yeah. It's just this, I don't know. It's not even that long of a book, but they just compress it into the dumbest way. It's just, again, like he kind of, there's so many different things that are at play between the book and the movie, where it's kind of the what's his name character, the older boy, Calvin.
I could rant about every single person in this movie.
The way that he runs into them in this movie, it's just so abridged. It's just like, why even make this movie? Why even make this movie if you're just going to kind of take like the cliff notes and then like shrink them down to like a sentence kind of? Because like when he runs into them in the book, he's kind of like, do you believe in kind of like these kind of preemptive thoughts where you feel like you have to be somewhere and then you turn up somewhere? And again, he's in a very specific weird spot in the woods. He said, I had a lot of other things to do, but like I had this urge to come here like today, and it's this
in the movie he comes up to them to hit on her.
Yes,
like he's like, oh, look, I don't think he says I like your hair then, but he says something else to sort of like flirt with her. Oh, he says like, oh, like nice arm, like a weird callback to something that happened like a day ago. To her hitting the other girl with the volleyball or whatever. And then it's like, it's not until someone asks him like, oh, why are you here? And he's like, oh, I don't know. I just had this strange urge to come here. And like that, it feels so weird and out of like, wouldn't you not like, I don't think you would be like hitting on someone and like being like Mr. Smooth Guy if you're like, what am I doing here? Like I have this strange urge to be here, but oh, cute girl, let me go talk to her real quick.
It's so weird and it's forced. I mean, like I understand that there's some things that are condensed, like they have two like older brothers that are in school instead of Charles Wallace isn't old enough to be in school yet in the book or whatever. And that's fine if you want to condense it to just 2 kids in this house, kind of, instead of 4 kids. That's complicated for a movie that's got to be 2 hours or whatever. But I also hate that recess scene where it's kind of like, don't you understand? You're beautiful, just like mom. Like I was just like cringing during that part. I was like, this entire movie, like I can see myself liking it a little more because I have context of what happens in the book because I've read it several times. I was just like, I can't imagine what anybody who doesn't know what happens in this book goes in and watches this movie thinks this movie is about. Like it's just so fucking confusing.
It was painful, I can tell you.
It's also like right from the get-go in the first scene when we have kind of, it's just like, I'm sorry, I really like it's really funny because there's this like Onion article headline that says negative review of A Wrinkle of Time peppered with critic assuring readers he is still totally supports diversity. The Onion.
Too real.
Yes, it's because like it sucks that we have to like put forth all these caveats of kind of like, I love the documentary and the Martin Luther King film, and hey, I love that a African American woman has such a large budget for a sci-fi.
The record. It was the first African American woman to have a budget of that size for a movie,
especially for a sci-fi and fantasy movie, kind of. And I want to put out that caveat, but I also want to say, hey, man, like, there needs to be room for people to fail. I mean, regardless of what you or I think of Black Panther and Wonder Woman, critics love those movies, and they did well. This movie did well too, but I'm a little more concerned about like the critics or whatever. And hey, man, there needs to be room to fail. Not everybody can succeed. White men directors, even though they're a large majority of this what's it called, industry, they fail every weekend. I mean, it's what boxofficemojo.com will display, like go through every weekend. It's a white guy failing every single week. It's no matter who you are in this industry, you're gonna have a shitty movie every once in a while, and it sucks that I have to put that out there. But
well, see, let me go into like a little rant here, because this is where my complaint comes in, is that I feel like the studios, the people that are making money off these movies, they look at diversity now as an opportunity to make money, because the unfortunate side effect of people caring about diversity in film is that when we put out these diverse movies, or these diverse movies get put out, people, there's campaigns around like, go see Black Panther, go see A Wrinkle in Time, so we can get more movies like that. And I hope that is the side effect of those campaigns and those things happening. Right. But I think the unfortunate thing is that the studios put out what I think are not great movies, even though they are diverse, and I appreciate the diversity in them and the fact that we're moving the needle forward in that way. I wish they would hold themselves to a higher standard when they put these movies out, And the thing I point to is like, if like Kathleen Kennedy can like keep putting out these Star Wars movies that like for the most part are pretty good. There hasn't been like a real stinker of a Star Wars movie that's come out like since she's been at the helm. And they still managed to make a shit ton of money, and they still managed to be crowd-pleasing blockbusters for the most part. That have also been, decently diverse. They've pushed the needle forward at least a little bit.
Right.
Then why is it so hard? Like, why can't we hold the same standard to like Wonder Woman and Black Panther and a movie like this, like A Wrinkle in Time? Like, why does it have to just be like, I guess my fear is that the studio is just going to be like, well, as long as we put a diverse movie out, we don't really have to make it that good. We don't have to spend that much time on it because people are going to make these campaigns about going to go see this movie, and we can just kind of keep putting out a shit product. And like, I agree with the notion that like, yeah, it should be allowed. There should be that allowance to fail. Like, they shouldn't be held to a high standard just for being a diverse movie. But at the same time, I wish the studios would at least like give them the same respect that they give to other movies that they put out there. Like, if they treated these movies like they treat like most of the actual like Marvel movies, then I feel like we would be getting some better products, Like if they treated it like the fucking Bible, like they do with a lot of other movies that are in their, tentpole franchises, then we wouldn't be like, I can't imagine a studio putting this out and being like, oh yeah, like this is a great product that we're getting put out. It just seemed like something that got thrown out because it was going to sell tickets by the virtue of it being diverse. Like if this, imagine this, like A Wrinkle in Time being put out as an all-white cast. Is anyone really going to go see that? Is that going to do really well? Do we think? Like this movie, I mean, like if you just put white people in all these roles, does that sell a lot of tickets really?
I mean, it has, but I understand what you're saying. It's like, I'm stunned that $100 million movie was put out in this condition by a studio that was like, okay.
Yeah.
Like, that's something's wrong. Something's wrong in this equation.
I don't know where to place the blame, because again, like we just said, like Selma's a great fucking movie. 13th is like one of the best documentaries I've ever seen. Honestly, like I felt like so compelled and changed after watching that documentary. I remember like sharing it on Facebook and being like, you need to watch this documentary. Like, it's going to show you things that you thought you knew about, our society that you had no idea. And I'm just so amazed that this is the next product that Ava DuVernay puts out. And I just feel like there has to be something else at play here. There has to be either a studio that's rushing to get this out, or there's a weird, like, it's a very short movie. It's like an hour and 49 minutes. So there's a studio that's trying to cut this shit down for maybe an earlier director's cut. I don't know. I've heard some reviews that have viewed it through the lens of like Ava kind of getting like dazzled by her own imagination in this movie, which I think is a little accurate.
Yeah, definitely.
And I've also heard people who have been like, well, it's kind of a damned project from the start because you can't really adapt the book because nothing is going to capture what people imagined when they read the book.
It's just, I was about to go into, I don't even know. It's fucked from the get-go, man. It's just kind of the first scene when they're trying to have this kind of, when they're kind of trying to force this chemistry between Storm Reed and Chris, what's his name? Chris Pine. I was just kind of like, okay, this isn't working for me. There's no chemistry here. The
daddy-daughter thing? Or?
Yes, the father and daughter thing. It felt weird and rushed and just below 100. It felt like there was no care in there whatsoever. And then we kind of, before anything remotely sci-fi comes into play, we kind of have this weird, like, ABC soap opera, kind of like Tyler Perry, kind of just low quality drama.
The principal scene?
Family. Yeah. Like, well, everything. It's the like, just, it looks like an anti-bullying ad that they would show you in school. Like it looks like it's just so many weird like ABC Family quality, like just bad, like, man, where did this $100 million go? Like into the really bad special effects.
To the animating all the Pokemon.
Yeah, oh my, don't even get me started on that shit. But it's just like, it's all of the, and again, the principal, the popular girl at school, like none of that really sets up a lot. It's just, it's also confusing, and I don't even know what anybody was really going for in this film. It doesn't, like, even before it gets into, man, like, you could never put the abstract element of this movie on the screen. It just, they fuck up just normal life, you know, in this movie. It's just like, before they even got the chance to be like, okay, now that you've seen normal life, let's talk about a fifth dimension. It's just kind of like, nope, I even believe this is a person in elementary school.
There's so much that I have a hard time buying into in this movie. And like a lot of it is like in the beginning where I'm just kind of like, clearly what I'm watching is not something like...
These aren't real people. These don't look like real people, like, I think
the biggest, I mean, Manny... So it's a Freudian slip every time. Charles Wallace, aka Manny from Modern Family, like I think is the first thing that goes toward that, because he's, again, they don't show us any examples of his genius. It's just he's smart and he wears a bathrobe, so he's a little man and he must be a genius. And like he's a hard character to buy into. He's not relatable at all because he's just talking in this, like, he sounds like Leave It to Beaver all the time.
Yeah.
Just talking this like uber like cutesy type voice.
It's also the
all
book.
The time.
The book didn't need this. What the fuck was I gonna say? The book doesn't even need these like flashback exposition bullshit. Like the book doesn't need like, the answer to the scientific equation was love this whole time. like the book didn't need that. The book didn't need Charles Wallace as like a baby. The book didn't need, like, it was just also like, we pick up on a stormy night in the attic. You know, like that's all it was. It didn't need like, oh, I remember my dad and he did science with me. Like it was just like all told through character voice. Like it was just like, this movie starts off with so much dumb, clunky exposition.
Well, then just even like the present action that happens in this movie, like when the Mrs. Whatsit shows up, and like, I don't know, for like, there's just like little things they could have done. Like the mother should have been way more protective in that scene. Like she's just kind of like, hi, who are you? Rather than like Manny, like, Manny, I cannot stop calling him Manny. Like, get behind me. Like there's this crazy woman that's in our house. Like it makes me think of like, you remember the one episode of Mad Men where the lady breaks into the house when Sally and
oh yeah,
Henry, is Henry the little kid?
Yeah, I believe so.
It might not be Henry. I'm not sure. But right. The Draper kids are home, and the one woman breaks into the home, and like that's a really creepy like episode of Mad Men. And like, not that I need this to get like creepy, but like that should have been like our first instinct of like seeing like Mrs. Whatsit to help us relate to the characters more. Of like, oh, there's a strange being in our home who is just kind of like a lady who's acting weird and talking weird, and like there was never any kind of like their world meets our world like confusion,
right? You know
what I mean? Like, and like the mother could have been like more angry in that scene, but she's just kind of like, hi, who are you? And not really like angry that someone's broken into her home, not concerned for her kids. There's literally a scene where little Charles Wallace just like runs back over to Mrs. Whatsit, and like the mother just lets it happen. Like doesn't even like reach out to be like, no, don't fucking go over by like that like homeless lady that's like inside. And like maybe there's something in the book, like maybe when that scene happens in the book, there's something about like Mrs. Whatsit being warm to them and they feel comfortable, but that's not explained in this. You know, there's nothing about that beforehand that makes that make sense. So there's like, when stuff like that happens in this movie, I just start like clocking out like a little bit by bit where I'm just like, I don't believe this. Like I don't believe that these characters. I can't like get invested in this movie. It's not transporting me to even the real world. So then, like you're saying, when we go to like the, fifth, dimension or whatever they go to in A Wrinkle in Time, like I don't believe that either.
Right.
And then the Pokemon show up. And the bad CGI takes you even further out of it.
He just has Pokemon eyes. Like, I thought it was just me. He looks like kind of Scyther or something like that. Just shows the Mrs. Who or no, the Mrs. Mrs. What's it transforms into a Pokemon. Well, yeah, I mean, it looks like a he, kind of like.
It does look like Scyther, yeah.
But the thing about the witches, the three witches, there can be different interpretations of stories. Whatever, I have no problem. In the book, they're kind of these more like Roald Dahl kind of characters. If you were to like picture like three like very ugly, very short, or not the Oprah one, but like two very short, ugly, like witches kind of just dressed in like whatever they can find like in the real world kind of. They have no concept of like.
I thought they were trying their very mildest to get across the concept of like with the Mrs. What's-It character, like not understanding like human culture and like.
But she looks like a fucking character from like the Hunger Games. Like they're just supposed to be like these meek kind of.
The fashion choices I thought were bad from a costume design.
Why do they?
What is the logic behind the glitter and?
They're supposed to live in like a kind of like mud kind of hut. Like that's the other thing is that in the book they're in kind of a rural kind of area in the woods. They live in the woods because they're poor because the dad disappeared, kind of. And then even deeper in the woods live these two witches who are kind of, or at least Mrs. What's-It, who live in like a really like just fucking haunted house kind of like mud hut kind of like looking thing. Like it's so confusing. It's such like a gross adaptation that it's like, what if they lived in LA and like when they were like walking to Mrs. What's-It's house, like there are palm trees everywhere and like she just lives in like this house that's probably valued for like $2 million.
Yeah, they say it's abandoned, but I was like, that's a nice looking house.
It's like it's on fucking like it looks like it's in Beverly Hills. Like it's fucking like it's like California chic. Like I was just like, what?
Can we have just a laugh about Oprah's first appearance in this movie when just big fucking Oprah comes out of the clouds?
That's not in the book. Oprah doesn't even. That's just bizarre.
I was fighting back laughter in the theater so much when that happens.
What was the
there's just
choice
like a big fucking like Oprah face and like,
hey kids, it's me, Big Oprah.
What are you doing down there?
There's no reason for that to happen.
And then they like, there's so many times where like, I feel like maybe the problem is that Ava DuVernay doesn't know how to make a kids movie, because like I mean, Selma's a pretty adult movie. 13th is obviously dealing with some like pretty heavy adult-ish issues. I mean, not that a kid couldn't understand those issues, but it's definitely geared for adults to consume that. And like. We talk about with other like kids movies that we've dissected on this podcast, like kids are pretty intelligent emotionally. Like they can handle some deep stuff in terms of, story, and their kids are also willing and like to be creeped out a little bit. Like a lot of our favorite kids movies are creepy, weird movies that like we don't even really understand like what was fully going on in them, but we were just drawn to the creepiness of them. Like A Brave Little Toaster or like I remember something that always stuck with me was like the Phantom Tollbooth like animated movie from when I was younger, and that's such a creepy, weird movie, and like it's unsettling as a kid. This feels like it goes in the opposite direction in that like I feel like that misguided interpretation of what kids actually want, which is just like happiness and like brightness and colors all the time, and like as if kids don't want like conflict or creepiness or darkness at all in their movies.
Fucking clashing ideals of like, oh, these some fucking Mother Goose characters that are in a very dramatic real world where somebody's father has been missing for 4 years. Like they don't make sense together. It's just.
And then like they have like when they go to like the
style and tone don't match.
When they go to the one planet that we see all the Pokemon on, and like they get there and it's like beautiful and it's like paradisical or whatever. And then they have a scene where they're all just like running around like laughing, just happy to be like in the grass, and it's like, what the fuck is that? Like there's so much about this movie where like not only do they not understand kids movies, they don't understand like actual, like I understand that they're not going to do the hard sci-fi from A Wrinkle in Time, like the book. Like they clearly glossed over that when like they failed to even explain like the basic, like what we do in like every single movie about like, you know, whatever, like if time was like a plane and like you fold it over on itself and poked a pencil through it, like, you know, you could jump forward in time. They don't even
in the trailer. They have the piece of yarn. They say, let's say this is point A and point B. You fold the string in half and put A to B together. That's what my mom and dad have been working on before my dad disappeared. In the trailer, nowhere to be found in the movie.
Yeah, and they don't explain that in any way. And it's like, it's fine for us as adults watching this because, like, all right, like we've been beaten to death with that concept in movies. Like, it's really a cliche at this point. But kids haven't seen Interstellar. Kids haven't seen all these other stuff. That's like, that's what the kids are your audience, and explain it to the kids through that. And then it's like they don't, like in like a sci-fi movie. Like if it's not like hard sci-fi, then you can look at like Star Wars or something like that. And like in Star Wars, like a big element of Star Wars is like props and like place and stuff like that. And like in this, they like just kind of throw us into weird settings. They don't really give a name to them or a memorable name. They don't really make it stick. And there's like no props in this fucking movie, which makes me so mad, because there's literally a moment in this movie where they're like, oh, now we're going to give you gifts. And they just give them fucking wisdom, when like, what a fucking opportunity to be like, and here, like, think of like Lord of the Rings when they have like the gift giving scene, and each of them gives like a tool that like ends up helping them in some way, you know. But in this, they're like, oh, I'm gonna give you a quote, and then even in that scene, like the Mindy Kaling character like breaks her idea of like only talking in quotes.
They just drop that whole fucking thing, and
then even one of the gifts is like, oh, your faults,
like,
oh god. But yeah, I mean, my point talking about them running around in the grass in that scene is like, in like a better sci-fi movie for kids, give them something to play with. Like, give the actors something to interact with besides, okay, run around the grass and just be happy. Like, especially if this is going to be like a 21st century kids in the real world meet some like otherworldly plane. Like, there should have been something to do about like, kids now don't really like just running around in the grass at that age, at like 13 or however old Meg is in this movie.
Right. No. And that whole thing doesn't really exist in the book either, that scene.
It's also like they're running around and laughing before they even then they get to the Pokemon after that, like the like color talking like flowers or whatever. Like, I would understand if they like were running through the flowers and like, this is amazing, but they're literally just running through plain basic ass fucking grass. Like, you have grass in LA, I think. Well, maybe not with the drought, but
I mean, and then she morphs into like a fucking piece of lettuce and
she
shit.
Morphs into a bay leaf.
Yeah.
Or like a cabbage Pokemon.
Which again is this kind of, I guess, like, that's more friendly, or that's what they wanted to. I brought my copy of the book because this is what I always thought the aesthetic was. Like, she doesn't morph into a piece of grass, she morphs into this. This is how I've always thought of A Wrinkle in Time. Like, this is the aesthetic of Wrinkle in Time. I'm going to hold this up to the camera. For those of you who can't see it, it's like a very complex kind of like shapes and like crazy like centaur kind of with wings and everything. It's a man, or it's a woman who morphs into a man, and they even get into some like weird kind of like transgender what would you call them? Like titles, like he, she.
Gender pronouns, or
Yeah, they get into kind of gender pronouns of like where the children are like, what should we call you now, and kind of and everything, which is very forward for the 1960s. It's incredibly, and it's also like a very moving scene, kind of where it's kind of like, I'm not this one thing. I'm something that evolves, kind of, and it's like, again, like it again, that's like a really creepy cover too. And I mean, again, that matches with like kind of A Wrinkle in Time. Like between the two of those, that's why I was so like, whoa. Like, of course, third or fourth grade me is like, yeah, I'm gonna read this book. Kind of. I don't know. It's so bizarre. But again, it's I don't know.
There's so much of this that just ends up turning into like just like a PSA for kids, like, whereas like, which is what also like shocks me, because this woman Jennifer Lee wrote the story for Zootopia, which like we praised as being like, you know, what a good example of a kids movie is because it tells this story, and a sort of side effect of the story might be kids understanding racism. Maybe not in the terms that we as adults understand that, but they're going to understand the ideas of like, you know, you can't judge a book by its cover, and not everyone, you know, is going to act according to our preconceived notions of people based on their, you know, in the movie it's species, but as we would perceive it as race or, you know, skin color or whatever. And like that was such a great movie for those aspects, and like this just kind of like heavy-handedly like hits us with all this like love is good, bullying is bad. They have like the one scene, the scene where like Big Oprah shows up and they're like, you're the wrong size, and she's like, is there a wrong size? And it's kind of like, yeah, I get it, like you're trying to teach kids about like fat shaming, but like couldn't you just have an actual fat character in this and like show something through that rather than like this weird like roundabout way of going through it, or this ham-fisted way? And
it's also like you're on Earth, and it's kind of like these witches on Earth are kind of they're supposed to more look like homeless kind of people who everyone judges, and they call them, in the book they call them something very 60s-esque. I can't think of it now. It's like a really like not politically correct term, right? It's kind of like this fucking homeless women whores, kind of like who
Gypsies,
are just
or?
No, I don't know. I can't think of the term. Let me see if I can find it. But it's also like and again, I understand this is a book in the 60s. If you want to modernize this, go for it. Fucking do your thing. But the costumes that you guys are wearing look fucking stupid and ridiculous, and just like I think Reese Witherspoon looks like she's doing community theater this entire time, because I don't think she has any real direction from the director or the writing standpoint. Like she kind of looks like she is in like a community theater production, and I think these costumes look like they're from community theater, and the special effects department doesn't even really like enhance like these weird dresses that they're wearing. They're just kind of like bejeweling Oprah's eyebrows into a unibrow. Like it's just like, what's going on?
I don't know
here?
what the logic behind it is, because if they are supposed to be these like super evolved like deities that are beyond human, you know, culture and nature, then like why are they buying into these ideas of like fashion and stuff like that? Like my understanding of, without having read the book, like of them being these sort of like homeless characters is like, well, who cares? Like it doesn't, these are possessions. This is, you know, fashion and culture. It doesn't matter when you are on the grand scope of like the entire fucking universe, you know? So I don't understand like why they like, again, why they have like costume changes and stuff. Like they change costumes every time that they change scenes in this movie, and like why does that matter to them as like otherworldly beings? And again, it just I keep going back to like I don't understand the logic behind their fancy costumes as characters. It doesn't really seem to fit.
Again, the only costume change that the reference from the book is when she turns into this sort of centaur character, like aka when she turns into like the leaf Pokemon in this. But like for some reason they keep using that as like, let's change costumes again, but they're actually changing clothes. And it's so confusing again, because these characters, like you were just saying in the book, are not they're not consumed by these real world possessions. They're above that, like kind of. They're wearing literally, like when he comes in and Charles Wallace goes like, "Oh, are those the sheets that you stole from so and so?" Like that's a whole big debacle in the book where it's kind of like, why did you steal those sheets from like this woman's house, kind of? And she's like, well, she has more than she needs. And like, I don't have time to concern myself with buying clothing. I didn't even hear him say that
in this movie.
I know, it's just,
and the way that they wrap them around her, it is just like it's an actual like,
it looks like a
fashion design dress,
Hunger Games kind of dress. Yeah, and what they're really supposed to be doing is these fucking homeless old like tiny women, just kind of like, obviously, they don't look great, like with like sheets wrapped around them. And they're kind of like, we don't have time to explain. We need to save your father in like the fucking fifth dimension. Like, I know you don't believe me.
Which is much more compelling than like majestic, godly, like Oprah coming out from the sky and being like, all sizes are beautiful and you need to come with me.
Right. And the Oprah character in the book is so evolved. I mean, the one that comes to them, the Mrs. Whatsit, she's only in this mission because she's so not evolved that she can speak like human language, where like the Oprah character is so evolved that she's not even human form. Like the entire book, she's just kind of
there.
Yeah, she's a voice like in their heads, kind of. Yeah, it's just like it's all. But in this movie, it's.
And I do understand like they probably do need to represent her as a body somehow in an updated version of this, but like. What was like as you're describing it, what was wrong with the sort of homeless women frantically like there's no time to explain?
Yeah.
That's way more compelling. That's way more exciting. It brings a sense of urgency to this rather than like, we heard a call because we traced it to its destination. Because
like the mother is supposed to be this beautiful character, and like they're like, it's fucked up that they don't even portray like the dad disappears and then the mother's just kind of like, I'm this like housewife. But in the book, she's like kind of like, I have to continue with like the experiment that we were working on, kind of like it's imperative. The movie, it
seems like she's given up on it.
Yeah. And again, there's no fucking NASA press conference where people are laughing at them. He's a part of a legitimate like government organization. And they disappeared, and it's kind of this metaphor for like what was happening with a lot of like men involved in the war and everything, where it's kind of like, well, what happened to my husband? And the government's like, listen, ma'am, like I know you came all the way to DC, and this is heartbreaking, but you should be real proud of him. He's doing like America's work, and he's gone, and we can't give you any other information than that. Instead of this one, where he's just kind of like, love is there, love is the secret ingredient. NASA's laughing at me. Ah! Like, it's just stupid. Like, he's on like a government mission and like it's, again, you don't have to adapt the book exactly. There's a lot of sound logic where your source material is.
And again, like I feel like I see what they were sort of going for, but I don't think they really fleshed it out or realized this concept of like love being like the secret ingredient, where like, I'm going to spoil another movie here, but I think it's crucial to this plot point. I'm going to spoil a movie for you, but shame on you for not seeing Interstellar by this point, Joe. But in Interstellar, they do broach the concept of like love sort of being like the answer.
Right.
But it's so well fleshed out in Interstellar where I won't go into like the actual specifics of it, but essentially, there are these sort of like otherworldly beings in Interstellar, and they are so advanced they can see that there is this bond between father and daughter in Interstellar, right. And they use that to their advantage because they can't speak English, they can't just tell the human race the answers that they need to know at that time, so they end up using this sort of overlapping timelines thing of like. Matthew McConaughey's character, like basically like pushing books off of a childhood library, where in the past his daughter is like looking there and seeing like the books being pushed off, and she's able to, because she's so smart and because she loves her father and she's looking for signs from him, not in that sense but in another sense, she's able to sort of piece everything together, and she gets the answer through that way. And in that way, love is the answer, because she wouldn't be in that library looking for things unless she loved her father that much and was, searching for him in another way. Right. Whereas in this movie, it just like boils it down to like, I love my kids so much and now I'm going to another dimension. Like, it's just the stupidest version of that. And like I've talked about this in other movies that we've reviewed before, where like I love when sci-fi is able to insert a personal connection, and like that's what I loved about Interstellar, as I just explained, and that's what I loved about Arrival. And this is just kind of like the bastardization of that, where it's just kind of like, well, they love each other and it's sci-fi, so it has to work together. And it's so ham-fisted and so bad. And like they try to like bring that like full circle in the end, where like there's the whole scene with Manny again, like being like the evil thing, where we haven't really gotten into that yet, but that was a whole horrible sequence of this. I don't know if that's in the book at all.
Yeah, I was about to read about that. It was like, were we on mic or off mic when I was talking about how there's some sort of Christianity thing?
No, it was this episode.
yeah, but it's like, here, let me read from like a little thing, just a reminder of like, this is a more condensed description. Mrs. Who quotes to Meg a passage from the Bible about God choosing the foolish of the world to confound the wise, and the weak to defeat the strong. 1 Corinthians 1:27-29. Mrs. Witch tells Meg that she has one thing that which is, did they call it in this movie? Yeah. It does not have specifically what it is. Upon arriving to the building where it is housed, Charles Wallace is still there under its influence. Meg realizes that the one thing that it doesn't have is love. She focuses all of her love at Charles Wallace and is able to free him from its control. And I feel like that's like, they somehow still don't kind of get that in this movie either.
Well, again, because they don't really explain what it is in this movie.
Right.
They have the one sequence that almost kind of like ruins the concept of it. Like, this movie is so simple. Like, I feel like they tried to dumb it down for kids when kids are smarter than you give them credit for, oftentimes. And like the most like complex that they could thing that they could come to is like good versus evil, and like evil people are hateful, and like evil is dark and light is good, and like it couldn't even go beyond that to like looking at like different layers of like, sometimes like good people have darkness in them, and sometimes like bad people have light in them and can be, turned around and saved, and all it can view it through is just like, it is this dark cloud that's through the universe, and we have to bring the light to it and shine light on it. And it's just so simple, and like it's such a bad villain in this movie. Like, what kid is going to watch this movie and be like, oh, I really care about them defeating the black fucking cloud of ink in the sky. Right. And then when like Charles Wallace like turns, like they could have like to great effect like changed something more about his appearance, like I don't like made his eyebrows creepy or something like that, like turn them up, kind of like they did nothing, and it's just him kind of like talking sort of the same way, but with like a little bit of a more like upturn in like his tone, and
it's like lightning bolt scars on his face.
Doesn't even really show up until he's like inside like the it at that point, and then when they're in that scene, like she's not really, it doesn't seem like she's focused on the it as a thing at all, because they haven't really explored that besides just like the it. It's bad. It's evil. But we don't really understand it as like a concept, and she's more just focused on Charles Wallace. And it's also so bad because like at numerous times after like Charles Wallace turns like evil, she sort of expresses the sentiment of like, but I love you. Like, you're my brother. You're Charles Wallace. Like, what about our father who loves you, who you miss? And like, every time she would keep doing that, I was like, oh, is this where he's going to turn around and they're going to get him back? And then the it is the big evil they have to fight. But then they just end up doing the same repeating line at the end of about like her loving him. And it's already been like played out and like ruined at that point in the movie plot.
It's also funny that I was going to continue about that, but I don't know. Just because maybe I have such a weird background with like religious literature. Like I got like deeply fucked up as a kid from like the Left Behind like children's series. I'm still fucking just
Nicholas Carpathian, man. He was the Antichrist.
It was truly manipulative and creepy that some old man was sitting there and writing that, where like, as this book I think was banned for a long time during the 60s because they had witch imagery, and then also within the book they refer to Jesus as not as like a son of God but as a great philosopher, which is like fucking really like anti. They were like, oh, he was just a great mind, he was nothing more than that. For a Christian book, that's fucking anti-Christ. Like, you know, like that's some serious shit.
Nicholas Carpathian wrote this book.
Yeah. It was just, fuck, I forgot the whole point of what I was going to say right there.
Carpathian.
Yeah, fuck those fucking books, man.
I was heavy into those as a kid.
Oh, they scared the shit out of me.
Did you watch the movies with what's his face?
No, Nick Cage. Wasn't he in? Didn't they eventually make the adult version, the Left Behind adult version with Nick Cage?
Maybe. I don't know if that ever actually came out. I feel like I remember hearing about that. But no, they had one with what's the guy? The guy, he does all the Christian movies and stuff. You know who I'm talking about, right? Curly hair.
Yeah.
I can't remember his name.
Ugh.
Listeners should probably know. It's like Cameron something, or yeah, you know who I'm talking about. I love those books as a kid, but they are so manipulative because it's like, you better accept God or when the end times come, it's going to be awful.
It gets into you too, because it's kind of like, hey, I sent you doubting all of the science, all of the bullshit with God. And hey, that's okay to doubt. But just know that you're going to fucking die and rot in hell while the rest of your family goes to heaven. For having those doubts. And it was like really manipulative and scary for me as a child, because I was like, I'm sorry, I don't believe in God, but it just doesn't seem like a plausible concept. Like,
all right, so having read the book, my big confusion with this movie, like I've said before, is that it just kind of jumps around without any real like explanation of like what's happening or why they're going from place to place. Like they'll just kind of be somewhere and here's a set piece, and then they'll be like, oh, we need to go to this place, and then they go to let's go to the seer or whoever it is, the Zach Galifianakis character, and then they're in and it's this place for whatever reason. Then they go here and it's this setting for whatever reason. Like I still don't understand the suburbia scene with all the kids.
Yeah, again, I don't think that's in the book. Again, the book has like a very, again, I went into this book as a third grader, not knowing anything about the world or hard sci-fi or conceptual kind of whatever. It very clearly explains kind of, it really shaped my understanding of what a hive mind is, and if you went to a planet that was entirely a hive mind, how that would work. So like that's a lot of what that was. I don't remember any of those. I remember they go through different tests and everything. One thing that I always remembered from this book that I like really enjoyed, that I didn't like in this book. Again, like they kind of try to appeal to the people who read the book, but then don't, like when the Michael Pena character is like 2 times 2 is 4, 4 times 4 is 16, kind of. And like Charles Wallace is like, yes, like that has hypnotized me, kind of. I don't know if that exactly happens like that in the book, but there's something about the rhythm, like kind of like when they're bouncing the basketballs or whatever. Mm-hmm. And then like the rhythm of that and the rhythm of math can kind of lure you, like the rhythm of conformity can lure people.
He does say something
into-
about like when they're hitting the balls down. He's like,
Says,
I can't
this."
stand the rhythm. Yeah.
But there's something about conformity, and there's something about the logic of how everybody else sees everything, and kind of like they teach you math in school, and even though your father is this fucking NASA level scientist and he teaches you shortcuts, you are punished for taking shortcuts, kind of. Everybody has to do everything the same way. It doesn't matter if we all reach the same conclusion. Everybody has to do everything the same exact way to like do this. Like, you can't take shortcuts on your math like homework kind of thing. But so this planet is kind of this same kind of thing, where it's everybody has to do the same thing. It's all this hive mind. It's one person thinking one thing. So it's not like a final conclusion, but this scene always stuck with me, like, you know, beyond remembering fine details of this book or whatever, is kind of like speaking out. Like, there's one time where like they kind of fend off like the energy of this planet by being like, all right, like let's start like dividing like prime numbers, or let's start like doing like things that aren't like 2 times 2 is 4. It's kind of like 13 divided by 2 is, you know, or like the prime number of this is da 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 da. It's
Going
not
out of sequence.
It's an irregular, yeah, and so it breaks the kind of conformity and everything. And again, this kind of is a larger metaphor for don't fucking conform. Don't let other people control what you think.
It's okay to be ugly.
Yes.
It's okay to be different. It's
Right.
going to be whatever. And
Or it's okay to, like, people are intelligent in different ways. You don't have to be this kind of intelligent. Like, that's a huge thing in the book, is she's not English smart. She's math and science smart. Like, that's okay. You're going to find your career path through that kind of. And it's a really, fucking give this book to your children. It's a really great book. It's just, where does this
none of that comes across.
Go so wrong in
movie,
this,
especially with that Michael Pena character. That was really what I wanted to ask you about, is what does he mean to the It, or to this movie, or to that planet? Like, because he just kind of shows up, and for having not understood the idea that the planet was supposed to be about conformity, like, I just thought it was supposed to be like they say like nothing's what it seems and trust nobody. So I just thought it was supposed to be like everything is sort of upside down type planet and unsettling things. So like I don't know where that really fits in with the book when they're like eating the sandwiches in their sand, but the white kid can't tell that they're sand.
Yeah, I didn't really understand what that was. Yeah,
that's why I thought it was just supposed to be stuff that was unsettling you because they're on whatever. Like again, like they just go places, and we're just kind of supposed to be like, okay, this is happening now. Like the biggest example of it is when they end up like they tesser, which I fucking hate that verb. Maybe that's from the book, but it's bad. Yeah. Just because it comes from like tesseract, which like maybe again maybe makes more sense in the book, but a tesseract is like a shape, so I don't know what that has to do with. Again, they're so scared to go into the scientific details of like what the father's working on, you know, how the kid is smart. So like they just say like, oh, he found the tesseract.
Right.
It's just like a vague like sci-fi term. Like it's the equivalent of being like he hacked the mainframe.
You're right. Yeah.
But when they tesser to the It planet because she wants to save whatever, and then they end up, I guess, going away from like the wheat field that they're in, and then they're in the like, or I guess maybe the trees rise up at that point. Again, things just happen in this movie, and we just have to go along with them. And they're in the forest, and then they're like, "What is that?" And they run away from it, but we don't even really get to see what it is. It's just like a cloud that's tornado sucking everything. Like again, they have such a poor understanding of what makes, if it's not hard sci-fi, just actual sci-fi work. Like, put an actual monster there. Give us something to look at besides just smoke cloud that's sucking up trees and shooting stuff away. Like, kids want a villain. Like, I remember, like, one of my favorite, like, fantasy books as a kid was Pilgrim's Progress. Do you remember that?
Yes,
like, children's book? And the, like, drawn version of it I had this fucking awesome drawing of... what's the villain in that? The like demon thing.
Oh,
you know what I'm talking about with like the horns and stuff. And like, I mean, it's supposed to be a representation of Satan, but as a kid, I was like, this is the coolest thing ever. And like, it draws you to it. And like, kids want that shit. Like they want like a cool badass villain to like either be scared of or identify with or just like think is cool and badass. And like no one's gonna go buy like a tornado action figure for this movie.
Yeah, no, I mean in the book, it is actually just a shadow. You know, like it's a shadow that's casting a shadow across the universe. Really, I don't know, but it's
but they're like in this, they're like torn between like it being like ink clouds that are going around, and then they have the weird like sequence where they're like showing everybody, and it's like, oh, but it is like people's fears and doubts and stuff like that, and like that's
also, yeah.
But I felt like that was a weird sort of almost irresponsible message to send to kids, because it's like, oh, like anytime like your friends are like being mean to you, there's just like a space ink cloud that got into them and made them act that way. Like I don't like they didn't even really connect the dots that far in that. They just kind of were like the ink cloud's going towards Earth, and then we're just going to show people being scared and acting out and weird stuff like that.
I didn't fucking understand that at all. Let's get back to the happy medium with like the Zach Galifianakis. Like I thought that was fucking weird as fuck.
Everything was weird. Not having read the book and not knowing what they were trying to get across. Like I imagine it makes more sense if you've read the book.
I just like I don't want to compare this too much to the book, but the happy medium in the book is a woman character who has virtually no humor. Like, was the joke that it was like a fat man in drag? Like, is that what's funny about that kind of scene?
I don't know if he's in drag. Like, I think he's just dressed like the rest of them are.
But then, like, Reese Witherspoon's character is attracted to him, and then he talks to Meg, and he's like, you don't want to end up like a fat loser in a cave like
with a
me.
Beard, yeah.
And I was just kind of like, what's going on? What is the hierarchy in this film?
Nothing works with each other. Like either the idea is that like there are these beings that are so evolved that like form doesn't matter, and like, you know, appearance doesn't matter and fashion doesn't matter. But then they all like are very carefully crafted in their appearance, and he's self-conscious about having a beard and being alone in like a cave, like. Or even, if he's like an all-knowing, all-seeing being, like, isn't he beyond that? And just kind of like life is more than what I look like or what I wear and who my friends are, like.
Or even like Reese Witherspoon's whole thing where she's like, I don't trust this character, or just like her whole like weird flamboyant kind of like, none of that's in the book. Like that's just like a whole kind of. I mean, again, she's supposed to be like this short little witch who's just kind of like, you know, like it's just like a whole weird, I don't know, invention, I guess, through Ava DuVernay or whoever the screenwriter is. Yeah.
Jennifer Lee.
Yeah.
I mean, it's either that or there's so little in the screenplay that. Like Reese Witherspoon's like, I got to give something to this character. I can't just walk around in a monotone voice reading these nonsensical lines they gave me.
Right? Yeah. Yeah. I don't know. And like again, like the book teaches you so much about just like the you know, the fifth dimension, folding space and time. In the movie, she gets that fucking really ugly, not attractive aesthetically through film like piece of paper that folds or whatever that her dad gives her, and I'm just like, give her something like prettier to hold like for like the camera or whatever. Like it was just like,
is that supposed to have something to do with space time or
I don't like that. That's the thing. That's not from the book at all. I have no idea. I just thought it was funny that she has something that folds, and that nobody really ever makes the analogy about the science of like folding is essentially what they're doing with time and space.
Yeah, I mean that's what the title is, and like we get that as adults, but like you need to connect that for the kids.
Yeah, well, she's like family folds over one another. Like, I was just kind of like, well, kind of.
Is that quote from the book like that? What does she say? She says like it's not gone, just
No,
unfolded,
yeah,
or something.
No, it's not from.
It's
the book,
so
really.
like
Yeah.
it's also so like it's aesthetically unpleasing as a quote. Like it doesn't have a good rhythm to it. I couldn't even like tell fully what like unfolded is what she's saying, or not
I
gone,
don't really
or
know.
it's either not gone just folded or not gone just unfolded. The concept's unclear, even when they have like that visual aid of like the
Yeah.
because it's not necessarily fold. Like the folding happened when you folded the original paper, not when you open up the.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah. It doesn't that none of that made any real sense to me. It wasn't.
She
clever.
says it 3 times too.
Yeah.
Like they keep bringing it back.
I did not like that.
It's one of the few props that exists in this movie. A movie that sorely needed props. Some kind of weapon. They have like the glasses, maybe, but that again, no one explains what those are doing or what those are showing her.
I mean, the glasses do exist in the book, but again, they hold a different purpose. I don't know. There's so much. So often, I mean, we've said this in reviews. The movies are all about showing and not telling, and this movie does 100% telling and no showing.
It doesn't even tell us sometimes.
Well, exactly. But it tells us like she is sad, she is not happy. Oh, in the universe, this happens. Kind of like it's just kind of like, God, give us a fucking visual cue or something. Like it's just. I don't know. And again, before they even go into something that's completely sci-fi and fantasy, no one in this movie acts like a recognizable human.
Mm-hmm.
Nobody. I can't name one character that
the
acts.
principal.
Yeah, and I don't even.
I think he's good. Andre Holland. He was kind of like a bright spot for the 2 minutes that he's in this movie.
Honestly,
but it's almost just kind of by comparison to the other ones. Honestly, in terms of like unrealistic like actions in the like when they're supposed to be in like the real world, like when the daughter comes home having gotten like detention or whatever for like standing up for her like little kid who got called crazy, and the mom's like, "Oh, you're gonna call the principal and apologize," and the daughter or Veronica or whatever, and she's like, "Yeah, but he called our brother crazy," and she's like, "I don't care." Like, what mother would react that way to like their daughter standing up for their son getting bullied? Like, especially when the mother knows that the son is kind of this out there like kid.
Right? Yeah.
I was very clocked out like from that point on at like 5 minutes into the movie where I was like, who are these people?
I don't know. Because again, it's completely different in the book.
Like I felt like they were just trying to insert a little bit, like, "Oh, my mother just doesn't understand me," but like that's an instance where your mother would understand you. Like they haven't established her mother as being this unrealistic person, but she just has that unrealistic moment there. Like maybe if you had like a very strict like type mother who was like, "Oh, you can't get in trouble at all," and like, but that's not established at all. It was just meant to be a moment of like, oh, my mom's angry at me, even though I know I did the right thing. But it's a poor example of a way to go about that.
The sad part is I do think Storm Reid is a charming child actor. Like there's a reason that they cast her as a lead in this sort of lead child role. And I think it's very unfortunate that she kind of has to be in this movie. I think it's unfortunate that she kind of has to be under this terrible screenplay and what I think is terrible direction too. It sucks because I do think she has I hope she has like a really bright future, because I do. She's really charming, and I think she carries some of this movie that a lot of adults don't. Like it's kind of I don't know. I'd love to see her in future stuff. I think Chris Pine carries his weight kind of. He's continuing the role of kind of like this Wonder Woman, like this like male man in distress.
Mailman.
This mailman. And where he's like,
Postal worker.
I just got to deliver this mail, baby.
Rain or snow or sleet.
This was weird watching after like Annihilation though, because it is like this girl that adventures into this like foreign place, and like somebody turns on her, and like at the end she even sees like this double of her, and just it's weird. Like 2 movies later,
I totally forgot about that whole scene with like the It like actually talking through Charles Wallace at that point. And again, like I felt like they were trying to get across a point about like beauty not really mattering, but I felt like I don't know, it just didn't. It felt kind of flat in that representation of like, oh, isn't she beautiful and she'd probably be popular, and it was just like too simple.
I don't even know if that
version.
fucking happens in the book. That doesn't sound like some bullshit that would happen in the book, because the book gets so fucking sci-fi. It's like Annihilation. It's like, why would that matter in the fucking real world? Like, it's just this. I don't know. It's not like Annihilation.
It wasn't about a lesson to be learned, or
right. It's just kind of, you're going to this fucking place that's so highly evolved. I don't know, that maybe it's forgotten love, and that's your only weapon that you can use against it and everything. And it's
like I said before, Jennifer Lee like forgot what worked in Zootopia, where it was like, tell your story and insert what you want the message to be through that story, and if you tell that story good enough, the message will get across. Whereas like this, I felt like they didn't tell the story nearly good enough, and then they tried to like fucking really fist this message in there without like being like, A, does it fit with the story? B, are we telling the story well enough that the message, you know, like we're inserting this, you know, message into this vehicle, but is the vehicle actually going to work for delivering this message? And it just feels like that we're just getting like slapped across the face with like these PSAs about bullying and self-worth and stuff like that. And those are very worthy topics to talk about, but the vehicle has to work to get those across. And like, you can't just like have those lines in there and be like, oh, it's an important movie because it talks about bullying and self-esteem and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Like there's moments where they sort of touch on stuff like that. Like I feel like there are like tiny glimmers of brilliance. Like I do like the scene where, I can't remember the white kid's name, but he's like, oh, like, I like your hair.
Calvin.
And she's like, what? Like, don't say that. Like, don't talk about my hair like that.
Yeah,
it's
no,
like,
I do like
that. That's a very like real aspect of like, you know, when your self-esteem is that low, or when you have that sort of opinion about yourself, like when someone gives you a genuine compliment, it kind of feels like they're like fucking with you, and you're like, what? Don't talk about that. Like, don't talk about my hair. Like, and there's also certainly an aspect of like, you know, race involved in that, with, you know, with African American hair and growing up like that, you know, in a white, you know, version of Los Angeles essentially. And I can sure that's probably a lot different. And I don't know, they just tried to ham fist these messages in there in a movie that doesn't work, and thus the messages don't really work. And I feel like people who have like a positive opinion of this movie aren't really able to look past like yeah, it's nice that they tried to do something, but we're looking past the fact that it didn't work. Like a movie isn't automatically good because it recognizes that bullying is a thing or self-esteem is a thing.
We can look at tons of movies. It's just, yeah, I don't know. It's it fails on almost all levels, this movie, I think.
There was like another nice moment that like the nice moments are so small and so like just kind of like slipped into this movie, whereas like the other like bad moments are like fucking like pounded into this movie with a sledgehammer. But like there's this sort of like nice thing where like she's talking to like Charles Wallace about like, you know, like you can't talk to strangers, and then, you know, he's like, well, not like all strangers are bad, and they like wave to like the African American guy, like the poor guy that's like behind like the fence at one point. They show him in like the flashback scene with like the It or whatever, and that theme like kind of comes back at the end, like when they see the girl, the bully, who's been like staring out the window at them the whole time, and like all she has to do is just like wave to that person. And it's kind of like getting across that nice idea of like, sometimes all that needs to be there is like this little like connection. And like,
Right, yeah.
that was a nice like little like wordless scene. Like they didn't have to like sort of slap us across the face with like, did you see why that worked? Because she waved to her bully instead of like confronting her.
Right.
And like that was really nice. But like those scenes are so few and far between in this movie. Like there's 2 of them really. Like,
Yeah. It's I can't think of anything beyond
everything else they have to like verbally say out loud what they're trying to accomplish. Like literally like, I love you, Charles Wallace.
that. Yeah,
Love is the answer.
I don't know. It's I heard about this movie 3 or 4 years in advance, I think. And again, me recognizing this title, I think I had some faith in it. I said, oh, Disney's kind of tackling this. Again, Disney, like you were saying about Star Wars, Disney has some bright minds within it, who I don't know. I just don't know how. I don't know where this went so poorly. I don't know. It's a little confusing.
Yeah, I don't know if it's a product of too much studio involvement or
not enough.
Or if it's not enough, where if they were so trusting of Ava
Yeah.
DuVernay from her past work that they were kind of like, okay, Ava, do your thing. And nobody was like, oh, she hasn't done sci-fi before. And also this is a hard book to adapt to a movie to begin with.
I think
as a movie that works for kids.
Right. I think like people have tried to adapt this into a film.
There was a preview, in like 2000?
3 other times.
Oh.
And they're all failures.
They've been like published?
I think
or like 3 times people have picked up the script and tried to make it.
No, like it's a movie that's been made, from what I can tell, 3 times. I think one was a TV movie. Nick and I were talking about that the other night. Yeah, it was like a TV movie in the 70s, I believe. Again, I think it was made somewhere in the early 2000s, and then somewhere in between both of those. People have made movies trying to make this film, and it never works because it's too abstract of a concept, really. I don't know how I would make this movie. That's why it's hard to punish this movie, but it's kind of also easy to punish this movie because it's like, what did you think was that different? And then also, nobody tried during this movie.
I have a hard time believing this was someone's best effort, in any real aspect.
I mean, that's what I'm saying. It seems like this kind of student project that no teacher ever double checked or looked over. It's just no authority kind of ever looked over this. It was just kind of it seems like this hodgepodge effort where nobody's in charge, kind of, and people have this general idea of what should be happening, but just I don't know. I couldn't believe that a studio, Disney, was like, yeah, we blew $100 million on this. Yeah, just put it out to theaters.
I had a really hard time accepting the fact that trying to wrap my head around the fact that Oprah would attach herself to this. Mm-hmm. And I started to get this thought in my head about maybe the reason Oprah not dropped out, but was no, I'm definitely not running for president, was because this movie was coming out. Maybe she signed on to it because it is up her alley in terms of empowerment of little girls and African American women and diversity and all these things. And then maybe the movie comes out and she's like, oh no, imagine the memes if I run for president of this big huge Oprah in the sky.
Yeah.
That's all I could think about watching this movie is this is someone that we were thinking about putting on the ballot at some point.
Right, yeah.
It's just so ridiculous.
Did she officially say that she's...
I mean, I don't know if there's an official way to say that you're not, but she did in an interview say that she's not interested in running for president at this time.
Okay.
Maybe in the future, so maybe we'll get a time to use these A Wrinkle in Time gifts during a presidential campaign.
That kind of makes me a little sad. I mean, there's more well qualified people, but part of me wishes there was an Oprah presidency.
I don't want to get into it on this.
It's not terrible. It's the other side of what a Donald Trump presidency would look like. Yeah, I don't know. Let's not get into it. But
I'd like to see Oprah run for Congress maybe first, and then we can see if the presidency is right.
Exactly. But yeah, I feel like we're at the place where we can give fingers if you've exhausted ideas and bullet points that you had to.
I mean, I didn't write any bullet points down. Okay. I saw this on Friday, and I just knew that anything you brought up, I could riff on how much I hated it in this movie. It was a painful experience to sit through, and it was short. It was an hour 49, but it felt longer than like the other two movies that we watched for reviews this week.
No, yeah, I don't really have any notes either. This is a very easy movie to talk about just because you can talk about any part of this movie and how it's so flawed. It's a really easy movie to trash.
I came home and like the first thing I said to Rowan was just like, there was nothing that I liked about this movie. Like, and I guess, I mean, there's nothing that I like. There's certain things that I respect. Like, I feel like the most effort went into like the soundtrack for this movie, not the score, but like the individual like radio singles, but they don't really, they don't really work in the context of the movie. So like, I can't even like give them a full like, merit for that. But I do think they're like catchy, well-produced songs. It is weird to hear DJ Khaled at the end credits of a kid's movie. But like
that's partially why I wanted to call it like kind of.
And there are some visuals and cinematography that are pretty cool at some parts. I was kind of laughing just at the similarities, but it is a pretty cool looking part when she finds Chris Pine again, but it looks like the Hotline Bling music video. Just like those like kind of like color boxes, the rooms that they're in. Yeah, I don't really have a whole lot else to add in terms of justifying a final score. I'm going to give it a half finger. I can't really find a whole lot of merit in this movie. The half finger there is maybe just for like I'm glad that we are at least pushing the needle forward and that people went out to see this movie and that there is diversity as an option in Hollywood, and that it would be bad if the movie was bad and it like really bombed. Like at least like it's a bad movie that made money so that we can make more movies. It's just my hope that we don't see studios viewing diversity as we can just make a movie diverse and we don't have to make it good. We should get both. We should get good diverse movies, because if we get good white movies, then we should get good diverse movies as well. And if Kathleen Kennedy can make Star Wars like, and view it through this like microscope of like everything has to be perfect in this and everything has to go through me, then like there's no reason we can't treat other movies like that through the studio system. Star Wars is evidence that like good movies that are at least somewhat diverse can come out that also make money and are blockbusters and sell toys and do everything the studio wants a blockbuster movie to do, while also being good and well reviewed. And this is just like the opposite of all of that. So a half finger for me. Hated almost every minute of this movie. Can't fully land on a 0, but it's very bad.
There was something that I thought you were about to say when you said the Hotline Bling thing, which is really funny. But that it's Chris Pine, right? Yeah, Chris Pine. I keep seeing this meme online that Chris Pine looks like Gary Johnson from the Team America. Like exactly. He just like exactly.
Is that his name in Team America?
Gary Johnson?
Yeah.
I believe so.
Wasn't that the presidential candidate? Third party guy?
Oh. Like of the Green Party?
Yeah.
Yeah, that sounds very familiar.
It could be both, but
Yeah, no. Again, I feel like I was really rooting for this movie. Just because of it's a favorite book of mine. I mean, I brought this book with me to even just college. It's a book that kind of like follows me around. I enjoy it. Again, I was kind of rooting for Ava DuVernay. I don't know. It. I couldn't help but think of the Dark Tower while I was watching this movie. It's just it's so in the same vein. Even the Dark Tower seems better than this movie at some points. Again, I can't get over how terribly, even before they get into the abstract stuff, how terribly just this sort of soap opera-y beginning was. Like, it looked like a student film. Like, I couldn't believe that Ava DuVernay, who did Selma, did this film who can't handle, like, a kid not doing well in middle school or high school. Like, I couldn't believe that she couldn't handle that task of, oh, this kid's not doing well in middle school or high school. I can't believe like, why maybe it's the cinematographer or something, but like, why do we have this many close-up shots? There's no reason for this many close-up shots. Maybe there's some sort of editor or something. It looks like a student film. It looks stupid. It looks dumb. It looks so not. I don't know. It looks like way beyond like a first time film. Like, it looks like, I don't know. It looks like a student film. There's zero chemistry between any of the characters. Again, the what's her name? I couldn't believe like the Mindy Kaling like kind of like quotes kind of quirk like immediately dropped out at one point. I was like, does nobody else fucking see that this just dropped out?
They do acknowledge it, but they acknowledge it in a weird way where he's like, am I crazy or you're not talking in quotes or whatever? And she's like, I'm so tired because we're in the it now and our energy is draining.
No, but even beyond that,
the other two are acting their normal selves.
No, but even after that, when they have a more kind of, she congratulates them without any quote or anything at the end or whatever. It's just like all of a sudden it just becomes like not a thing anymore.
Oh, I didn't catch that. I don't doubt it.
Again, character arcs in this movie take place over like 5 minutes. Character beats come out of nowhere. The effects really aren't that great. Yeah, I don't know. There's so many children, and I want to blame this on the fact that, like, hey, it's a children's book and it's a children's movie, but there are so many great children's movies out there that work on so many different levels that can appeal to audiences across all boards. I mean, beyond Pixar, like, there's so many just great children's books and not even books. Children's movies that are based off children's books and everything out there that do so well that I can't even give that excuse for this film. So, geez, again, this is gonna be 3 reviews in a row. I'm gonna give it a half finger. This is gonna be 3 reviews in a row where Mike and I have the same exact review.
2018 is off to, we're in sync.
This is not predetermined. These are, well, no, all my scores are predetermined. I had no idea Mike was going to come up with any of these scores. But yeah, it's super weird that we keep coming to the table without discussing prior and coming to the table with the same scores. That's unprecedented.
That's what 125 episodes of this podcast will do to you.
Yeah, we're in sync now, baby.
We're in the hive mind now.
We are.
And the rhythm, I can't take it anymore of this movie.
I can't even think of the planet that they're on. Doesn't matter. This movie sucks.
They probably said it in just one throwaway line that you could barely understand.
Yeah.
So that's going to come to, obviously, a half finger for the podcast officially. If you agree. Oh, let me read the Rotten Tomatoes because I forgot to get to that.
Go for it. This movie doesn't have that bad of a Rotten Tomatoes score, does it? What's the percentage?
On review aggregator website Rotten Tomatoes, the film holds an approval rating of 48% based on 219 reviews and an average rating of 5.5 out of 10.
That's almost half.
No, I'm reading the wrong one. I forgot. Sorry. I forgot to copy over the Wrinkle in Time one. That was because I was about to read the synopsis and it was like Red Sparrow aims for smart, sexy spy thriller.
This was smart and sexy.
Hold on. Reception. Critical response. On review aggregator website Rotten Tomatoes, the film holds an approval rating of 40%.
Still not bad. That's
based on 193 reviews and an average rating of 5.1 out of 10. The website's critical consensus reads, A Wrinkle in Time is visually gorgeous, big-hearted, and occasionally quite moving. Unfortunately, it's also wildly ambitious to a fault and often less than the sum of its classic parts. I don't know if I would agree about classic parts. No. Like, what in this movie is like, oh, how original, how fresh, an instant classic. Bayleaf, the Pokemon, flying around.
God, those Pokemon. I thought I was playing a fucking 3DS or something when it like looks at like the fucking...
It reminded me of the game Flower.
Yeah, no, yeah. And it's I mean, like, that's so bizarre that they replace that with like the book cover that I was just showing you. Like, it's fucking bizarre.
Yeah.
Camazotz is the planet they were on.
Oh, yeah. They do say that at one point.
Yeah,
it's a little more established than I was giving it credit for. But yeah, if you agree or disagree, leave a comment on SoundCloud, YouTube, wherever you're listening and or watching this, or hit us up on Twitter or Facebook. Anywhere else, we'd love to talk about this with you. And as we've been saying all week, or all month really, join us on our Facebook group if you want to discuss further there as well. Search How Many Fingers Am I Holding Up the Podcast, the Facebook.
Yeah.
No. How Many Fingers Am I Holding Up the Facebook group?
Right, yeah.
Not How Many Fingers Am I Holding Up the Podcast, the Facebook group.
Yeah.
Last episode. How Many Fingers Am I Holding Up the Facebook group? It's just a place we have for all of us to gather and talk about films, and doesn't have to have anything to do with the podcast. It's just a place for film lovers that happens to share our name.
Yeah.
Because we might use it for the podcast now and then. So yeah, join that group definitely and share your opinions there. And pretty much everything else you might need to find about us is at howmanyfingerspodcast.com. That's about it.
That's about all we got.
Yeah. Trying to think of something witty to say.
There's nothing witty about this movie.
Just
really.
Drained by having to review this movie. And I'm not sure what we're reviewing next week because we're recording this in advance. But tune in anyway. Check out our review of Game Night last week and Red Sparrow the week before that.
I'm sure it'll be Isle of Dogs, Ready Player One.
One of those.
Yeah.
I don't know the order yet, but
we'll see.
Tune in.
It'll be one, maybe.
Maybe. All right. We're going to bed. Good night.
Later.
See you next week.